G'day, welcome to episode 114 of the Noob Spearo podcast. I am your host, Trek. I am back down in Melbourne today for the last episode. It's a dual interview today, though. It's something a little bit out of the ordinary. We've got an innovative product created by David Hallamore called Scorkl, and I got Luke Growney, one of the co-founders of Ninepin Wetsuits down there in Melbourne. I've got a Ninepin suit. I love it. And David Hallamore from Scorkle got on and backed our Kickstarter 99 Tips to Get Better at Spearfishing, and hence why he's on the show today. So it was great to catch up with these two characters. I got out for a full day diving with Luke. So part one of today's show is all about Scorkle, which is a compressed air, basically like a pony bottle, that can give you an extra few breaths if you're diving reasonably shallow and just want a little bit of extra time on the bottom, and it's legal to use compressed air in your part of the world. It's not for everyone. There's an ethical discussion around using compressed air, and people have strong opinions about it, particularly freedive spearfishermen. So have a good listen and have a listen to the ideas behind this product. He's a really interesting character. He used Kickstarter with the crowdfunding model, same as we did with 99 Tips to Get Better at Spearfishing. He did, however, raise a little bit more money. I believe somewhere in the order of $1.3 million on his first round of funding. So Scorkl's a really interesting product, and we're going to have a bit of a chat about that in part one of today's interview. After that, I'm going to go down with Luke Growney. We talk a little bit about Ninepin Wetsuits. I've ended up buying a suit myself. He also sponsored the 99 Tips to Get Better at Spearfishing crowdfunding campaign. So it's really cool to catch up with these two guys who supported us a long time ago when we did the 99 Tips crowdfunding campaign. So awesome. I really enjoyed today's interview. This rounds out Melbourne for the big trip. So thanks to all the supporters on patreon.com. You guys helped to make this trip happen. So raised over $800 that more or less paid for the Melbourne trip. So next trip headed up. If you are looking to support us on patreon.com, the next trip scheduled is for February. It's loosely penciled into New Zealand. Hopefully I can go over there and shoot a big massive yellowtail kingfisher. I'd love to do that. It's been on my list for a long time. But anyway, let's hook into today's interview and wrap this Melbourne series up. Today's Dynamite Noob Spearo podcast is brought to you by spearfishing.com.au. That's right, the fine folks over at Adreno have been supporting the Noob Spearo podcast since about episode 18. And they help pay the bills around here. Just want to encourage you to check out spearfishing.com.au and use the code NoobSpearo. You can save $20 on every purchase over $200. But it's just a great online shopping experience. The reviews are phenomenal. If you want to check out a new spear gun, new pair of booties, new pair of gloves, someone's used them before, they've written a review, it's on their website, it's all there there for you. Head along to spearfishing.com.au and thank you for shopping with today's major sponsor, Adreno. So g'day Noob Spearo community. I'm still down here in Melbourne, and guess who came to the Noob Spearo community night at the Adreno store? It was David Hallamore, who got on and backed our Kickstarter project for 99 Tips to Get Better at Spearfishing about a year ago now, and I've been waiting to do this interview with him. He's got a neat, unique little product that's taken some time to get to market, but he's shown me a lot of the videos and we've had a good look at it, and I'm quietly impressed, so it's awesome to get you on the show finally, David. So just welcome.
Thanks very much for having me, Shrek. It took me a little bit longer to actually get this interview organised because it took me so long to get this product to market, but that's why it was sort of good to be able to talk it through properly with you today.
And your Kickstarter project was exactly the same as ours. We raised a huge amount of money. I think we sold $15,000 on Kickstarter. You sold $1.3 million. So any comments on that?
Well, pretty much the same. Pretty much the same. I had put a lot of effort into trying to get this product up and running, and really gave the Kickstarter a crack because I thought it would be the perfect sort of platform to sort of test to see if people were willing to buy it. Mm-hmm. I thought it was really cool, and it was funny actually. I had a bit of one of those moments where I'd spent sort of 6 months preparing for it, and I'd spent all this money, building the prototype and preparing for the Kickstarter launch. And like the week before, I was just getting the massive horrors going, there's no one who's going to want this. Like, I'm probably the only person in the world that actually thinks this is really cool. Mm-hmm. But luckily enough, it wasn't true, and there was a few more people out there.
Yeah, it's a shot in the dark. I mean, I kind of relate to you. Our planning was cut short. We were going to put this huge timeline on it, and I was just like, we're going to get it done. I think Kickstarter and Indiegogo are both fantastic platforms for connecting people with unique products, and they're not made by massive corporations that have just thrown money at stuff and having a go. This is for everyday people with a good idea, and I think you definitely had a good idea. So let's talk about Scorkl. What is it?
So Scorkl is effectively just like a shallow water, underwater breathing apparatus. So it's pretty much just like a mini scuba tank, but instead of strapping something to your back, you've just got a small portable one that hangs out of your mouth. That means you can breathe underwater. It's certified to 6 meters depth, and the regular Scorkl has the equivalent. It fills up to 200 bar, so it has the equivalent of either 68 breaths in it or 80 breaths in it, depending which model you buy. But what it was just a sort of like scratching an itch for me, having scuba dived for a long time, but not necessarily being someone that went out there every weekend ever since. It was more just like a sporadic thing. But also being a keen sort of amateur or, spear diving or free diving and just water person, just sort of finding something that took me a little bit beyond my natural ability or the ability where I hadn't necessarily put the time and the effort into becoming like an expert of either free diving or spearfishing, but still being a real person that loves the water and just going, okay, well, this is sort of something that sort of expands my natural abilities and it's just a whole heap of fun.
I think there's a real gap there you spotted too, because a lot of people aren't fit enough immediately to have a good crack at freediving, and both freediving and scuba diving really, I mean, freediving doesn't require a course, but in order to be competent, it's either a lot of time in the water with someone who can teach you some things, or do you do a course? With scuba diving, there's huge entry barriers in terms of doing an open water course before you can even dive to 18 metres. So I think the Scorkl is kind of unique in the fact that you don't need a certification to be able to use it. However, there's definitely some safety concerns which I really want to chat about as well. Is that kind of how you sort of see it fitting in?
Yeah, exactly. The Scorkl, it's pretty much just, somewhere in between snorkeling and scuba. So, forever, there's only ever been snorkeling, and then there's been scuba, and there's sort of been 15 metres in between them, other than, say, free diving, which is sort of almost, a little bit different. And so this, because it's specifically not meant to be going to sort of 18, 30 metre deep for sort of 45 minutes at a time, it is much more sort of your ability to use it at sort of depth and for time is restricted. But at the same time, because it is compressed air that you're breathing, there are inherent risks which you would normally learn doing, say, a scuba diving course, and which I have to sort of stress, and it's very important, is a real, effectively life-threatening risk that I need to make sure my customers are aware of. And because it's available, sort of off the shelf, so you don't necessarily need to show that you've done like a scuba diving course, and you can buy it anyway. It does have those safety risks much more than, say, like snorkeling would.
Yeah, there's risks with snorkeling, there's risks with freediving, there's risks with scuba diving, and I guess anytime you're into the underwater world, we're dealing with risk. I think the thing with compressed air is the fact that if you take air down with you, a lot of people don't understand is that at 10 metres, if you have a full breath of air at 10 metres and your lungs are full to capacity and then you hold your breath and you head for the surface, you can get something called an expansion injury. And you've talked about it, various types of barotrauma. You see it when you haul up a fish from depth and the swim bladder pops because it comes up too rapidly. And I think the danger with this is in that first 10 metres, there's quite a severe pressure gradient between, and I guess your product's rated to 6 metres, which probably means that you're not under. You're not going to get as much expansion as if you went to 10. However, there's a very real risk there. How do you approach that?
So these pulmonary barotraumas, like the lung expansion or the lung, that exploded lungs, sort of safety issue. Those type of things have even been documented as shallow as, say, 3 meters, or even in swimming pools, is apparently. And so, just being at 6 meters doesn't sort of preclude those at all. It's it's the biggest issue that I face with the product, and I try to make sure I'm as upfront about it as I possibly can. I think particularly, say, for your audience, who are capable divers, they might sort of look at this product and go, oh, fantastic, like I'll just sort of take it down and stay down for longer, which is, part of the appeal, but then without appreciating that if they take a full gulp of air and just don't exhale during the ascent, that they legitimately can damage their lungs quite easily. It's a big issue, and I think with all water sports, with all sort of adventure type activities, there are always risks, and so and there's always a risk with using a spear gun and pointing it in someone's head. So I just have to try to be as upfront as I can about it. Try to make sure the messaging there, try to remind people, try to make sure as best I can that message gets out. And that's what I'll do. So I don't think with a magic wand it's ever just going to disappear. I just have to make sure I'm as upfront and aware of it as I can be.
So I think one way around the safety thing too is when I did my scuba diving instructors course, we taught people when they had to do an emergency ascent for whatever reason, which means a very rapid approach from the bottom, which if you're at depth and you're scuba diving, you've been down for a while, you run a risk of decompression sickness. But I think one of the things we got taught was to hum on the way up, and it keeps your airway open. But I think if you ascent at a normal, safe rate and you just breathe normally, you can avoid nearly any chance of barotrauma or expansion injury. Is that kind of your take on it?
What is sort of clearly stated, right in front of your face on the regulator is that not neglecting to exhale during ascent can be life-threatening. Yeah. And so the messaging that I say, instead of saying hum, is I say just whenever you use, never hold your breath. That's just sort of like a basic scuba diving principle. It's easy to remember. Yeah. But particularly don't ever neglect to exhale during the ascent. So you're breathing continuously in and out, but during an ascent, never holding your breath.
So I think, again, going back to the space I think that Scorkl operates in, like with scuba diving, you've got this, you've got a big tank on your back. It's on a BCD. You've got 2 regulators, and there's a level of complexity to understanding how to use that equipment. Freediving, on the other hand, while it is freedom in terms of there's no equipment, there is a level of competence that you need to get to in order to be able to do it even remotely successful. I think there's a huge group in the middle there that would love to explore the underwater world to that sort of 5 or 6 metre mark, and where all the bright, vibrant colours are, and they can experience kind of the wonder of the ocean without having to do a $600 certification. So I think there is a good space there for it. It's just making sure they understand how to do it safely and correctly. What are some of the use groups that you think with the Scorkl?
Well, I think just for the Scorkl, like basically scuba divers, free divers, spear fishermen, they're the sort of the classic groups that you would think. But outside of that, there's anyone that's sort of in and around the water and that loves it. So I think boat owners will be particularly interested in it as something which could help them unfoul an anchor if it's if needed, or inspecting the bottom of a hull, or unwrapping a rope around a prop. And the boat owner, the recreational boat owner market is huge, but I think they'll really get a kick out of it too, because it's just an extra gadget to have in the boat, a bit of a Christmas present or something like that for your dad or your brother, where all of a sudden you've got something sitting in there, you find a nice little spot, you find maybe you're snorkeling and see some crays, or there's just something down there that you want to sort of check out, and instead of gearing up with all the scuba gear, you just sort of go into the cabin, take this out, duck down and stay underwater sort of, I say up to 10 minutes, depends how deep you go and how good you are. but you've just got that there accessible to effectively explore underwater. So yeah, boat owners as well as your classic sort of underwater explorers.
There's times, I particularly remember in the early days, where I'd get onto a crayfish and you spend a lot of time positioning your body and then getting your hand in the right position and, really sort of sneaking in and getting to within closing distance. And then sometimes something happens and you've got to start it all over again because you need to return to the surface for a breath. And I think provided you're in a state or a country or a territory where it's legal to take crayfish with compressed air, it's a great use group for it because they can be a tricky little animal to capture, and they're such fun when you do capture them, but sometimes it'd be nice just to have that extra 1 or 2 breaths just to be able to close on that cray and not rush it, because otherwise you snap feelers and legs off and all the rest of it and you never get that crayfish in your hand. So I think that's another real little cool use group for it. Again though, there's just the excitement, you consume a lot of air as well. So.
Yeah, that's right. And there is like you say, you've got to be doing it in where you're allowed to. But there's that element of scuba diving being less sporting than say breath hold when you're hunter gathering. But the other really cool thing about the Scorkl is that you can fill it up by hand. So each Scorkl comes with an adapter that lets you refill it directly from a scuba tank or a dive compressor. But the actual big appeal, which we sort of hadn't really spoken about yet, but is that it comes with you can purchase a high pressure hand pump with it, which means you can just fill it up wherever. And so in that way, that whole hunter-gatherer thing really sort of comes back to it, because you've put the effort in to fill up your Scorkl the night before or on the boat, or wherever you are, because it takes, you've got to put your back into it a little bit. It takes a while to fill. But, you get that reward for the effort, and it becomes its own sort of, sporting activity itself. And yeah, you are breathing compressed air, so it's not as challenging as collecting crayfish with breath hold. But you're still against the elements in just as many ways.
Yeah, no. In cold water, like in parts of America, they spearfish on scuba, and there is a stigma around it. And a lot of freedive spearfishermen are exclusively about doing it on a breath hold. But I think there's particularly a group there when they're in the early days, and there's something about earning your stripes, but it's also sometimes about putting food on the table. And so I can see a practical use for it, and it is what it is, and a lot of people will be interested in it, I think. So in the Kickstarter video, it says you don't need a scuba certification to use a Scorkl at all. I think that's awesome, because it's a $600 qualification that a lot of people find too big an entry barrier to getting in the water and having a go. So I think that's something unique about Scorkl. Is that true in every country?
Yeah, that's correct, Shrek. You don't need a scuba certification to use the Scorkl, despite what we were talking about before, about the very real risks of pulmonary barotrauma lung expansion injuries. But one of the major reasons why it's important to do a scuba certification is around decompression sickness, or as most people know, something called the bends, more familiarly known as the bends. The bends occurs because of a buildup of nitrogen, and the two major factors for that are time underwater and depth. Now, the Scorkl being a shallow water, small cylinder breathing apparatus means you're just massively limited for how long you can spend underwater and how deep you can go. So, as I mentioned, it's rated to 6 meters. You shouldn't be using it below 6 meters. And also, there's when it's full, there's 80 breaths or 68 breaths in it, depending on the model size, and that just means I say up to 10 minutes underwater, and you're doing that if you're a good, experienced, relaxed diver. But then for the novice out there that's chewing through there, they're only sort of getting between sort of 2 to 5 minutes out of it. And so something as serious as decompression sickness, which is a major part of certification, just sort of isn't really a factor at all.
I just remember when I started doing scuba diving in New Zealand, we were diving in 20 metres in dirty water, so 60 feet for our American listeners, and I would go through an entire tank of air in 20 minutes. 20 metres, 20 minutes, going for crayfish, because I was just so excited. I was chewing through the air. I think being relaxed underwater, it's a good part of freediving, obviously, but probably has a lot of benefits to getting good air economy out of a little tank of air as well. So that's pretty cool. How long? So you got a full tank of air. You can get up to 10 minutes. Is that kind of a typical use case, or is that kind of an exceptional athlete?
Yeah, it's 10 minutes is definitely at the top end of what you can get out of the Scorkl. And the math sort of roughly works out like this. So there's 68 breaths in a Scorkl, in a regular size Scorkl cylinder, 80 in the bigger one. Typically, you'll sort of they say that the respiration rate of a normal diver is between 12 and 25 breaths per minute. And so that works out, if you just sort of divide 68 or 80 by 12 and 25, sort of 3 to 5 minutes worth of air. But that's at surface pressures. And so for the non-divers, non-scuba divers out there, what you learn is that the deeper you go under compressed air, the faster you chew through the air. And it works out that at 10 metres, you chew through double the amount of air that you use at the surface. And so to be getting 10 minutes out of the Scorkl, you're breathing sort of once every, you're breathing 7 times a minute rather than 12 to 25. But that's an inhale and exhale cycle of sort of once every 10 seconds. So if you sort of just imagine yourself sort of doing that, it's definitely possible. But as you dive, and become more experienced, you'll just realise it's pretty easy to sort of chew up air if you're moving fast and you're excited, and it's all about mastery. So in the same way that you get better and better at freediving, you get better and better at snorkeling as well.
The pump, I was impressed with the items themselves. I've had a good look at all of the Scorkl, the pump. The equipment is robust. It's well made. You haven't rushed it. It doesn't feel like something that came out of a factory in the outskirts of some war-torn country or something like that. It's really well made, sort of high quality stuff. So I was impressed with that. And tell us a little bit about the journey from raising all that money on Kickstarter to kind of getting it where it is today, where you've just shipped out a whole bunch to some of your Kickstarter backers.
When I initially launched the product on Kickstarter, it was mid-2017, and I had hoped to be able to, because I'd made plenty of prototypes before then, and the product was effectively, I'd been using it for a year myself. I had hoped to just get it to market within 6 months. But what I then did is I wanted to make sure it got properly tested and certified to international standards. And that was sort of just part of the plan originally anyway, but I expected that process to be much quicker. And it ended up taking about a whole year and a little bit more, longer than a year extra, to be able to go through that. And so the basic sort of classic scuba regulator standard, something called EN 250, and that is what all your scuba regulators are certified to. That's the same standard that the Scorkl is certified or was tested to, but obviously because it's tested to 6 metres rather than 40 metres, it's not exactly the same. But that's the depth is the only difference. And to do that, I was over in Florida at a US Navy diving testing facility, the same one that does effectively all the testing for the US Navy new gear for the better part of a year. Okay. And that was it was frustrating for the people that had purchased the product that had to wait an extra year. And it was frustrating for me because I obviously wanted to get it to market, but it was just one of those sort of non-negotiable things. You make a product that's as important to people's safety as this, And I just sort of wanted to make sure I sort of did everything the right way, which took a bit longer, but I think it was definitely worth it.
You've got a couple of different case options there. I've had a look at the big deluxe option, which I think if I was going to invest in it, that's what I'd look at, because you can fit 2 Scorkles in there. You can fit the pump, which is it's a heavy-duty item. It's got a couple of different items in there. Just can you fill us in on what's in there, what you would kind of get if you went that way, and can you travel with it?
Yeah, funnily enough, so when I, just sending a product to market and seeing what people, if they want it and what they're willing to pay for it and all that sort of stuff, the funny thing was that it was actually the most expensive item, the big full package, that people wanted more than everything. Like, that was the biggest selling one. And that was because what that provided was, the full kit: 2 Scorkles, a hand pump, the scuba tank refill adapter, the compressor refill adapter, and a big, cool, waterproof carry case. And so I think it's sort of like that thing, in for a penny, in for a pound sort of thing. If I'm going to get something, I may as well get the whole gear, or at least get the good version of it. So instead of just getting, say, 1 Scorkle, which is quite cheap, really, it's like $229 I sell it for. The full pack, which goes for $916 or something like that, which has sort of the 4 items, was the best selling. But yeah, so I've got the two size Scorkles, as I mentioned before. I've got the hand pump option, which means you can fill it independently by yourself if you want to. And then I've got 2 size cases. I've got the big one that fits the hand pump, and I've got a smaller one that just fits 2 Scorkles, which is sort of perfect if you just want to, sort of carry it around almost like a, handbag almost type sort of thing. But that's really cool and waterproof too. And then I've got an extra little cool thing, a retractor, which means you can affix it to a dive belt if you want. So if you're there on the surface snorkeling, looking around for crays or something like that, and you want your hands free, you can just sort of stow it on your waist, on your dive belt, and then if all of a sudden you're down there, you want to take a couple of breaths, off it comes off your waist, stick it in your mouth, breathe a couple of times, and then you just let go of it, and it'll retract to your waist. And hopefully over time I'll develop a few more accessory items, and I think as people use it, I'll come to understand a bit better what is and isn't working. And I think suggestions from customers, I think, will be really helpful with that.
I remember when I was young and I did my scuba diving instructor's ticket, part of it was spending a month in Tonga, and a lot of where I was in this outer island group called Vava'u, they have these islands that come out of hundreds of metres of ocean, and then they have this coral ledge attached to it, and it steadily drops down to 10 metres, and then it just plummets to whatever depth, 200 metres, keep going. And it's this beautiful, clear water, but the 10 metre coral sort of mark, the light and the amount of life in that coral was just phenomenal. There's you could spend an hour just looking at a very small moray eel that you've never seen before, and you could interact with it. And I think that, the ability to spend, say, 3 or 4 minutes just down there, just interacting with like a clownfish or something like that, and a bit of plate coral, it's amazing. It's an amazing experience, and it helped me fall in love with the ocean, which ultimately led to freediving and all the rest of it. And I think perhaps the Scorkle could serve as like a bit of a gateway drug for a lot of ocean users, whether they move on into doing a full scuba certification or whatever. But there's kind of this in between space that I think it's kind of cool for, and it's a cool little item. I'm stoked you got on our Kickstarter and brought it to my attention. I'm not sure how many Spearos will take it up. It's an interesting idea just to see what will happen. I'd really like to meet some of the people that got on and backed your original Kickstarter just to see how they're going to use it. I wonder if they are going to travel to some of these remote tropical islands and dive those shallow coral reefs, because I think it's a perfect item for it.
Yeah, it's spot on. And what I forgot to sort of say before, just around the travel aspect, is because it is small and portable, and I've made these carry cases, they're purposely constructed so that you can take it as airplane luggage, either as checked or as hand luggage. And the reason why is because the regulator just very easily detaches from the cylinder, and that's the requirement that airlines have, is just that you show that you have a non-pressurised cylinder. And that's sort of super easy with the carry cases. And imagine that compared to carrying your own sort of scuba gear, sort of island to island, or even having to rent it somewhere where you can't. or you don't want to, or it's too expensive or whatever, you've got your own sort of kit wherever you go.
Now, I pump up my bike tyres every now and then on my road bike, and I get a good sweat on just even doing that. I'd imagine pumping up a cylinder is a hell of a lot of work. So it's nice that there's another couple of options in the fact that you can fill it from another dive tank, or you can fill it from a compressor, provided that they're allowed to, because some of them are very fussy about which cylinders they'll fill. But it's great having those three options, I think. A lot of the time, if you're away on those tropical islands, you could just take a larger gas air cylinder with you and fill off that, I guess. Is that kind of what you've seen happen?
Yeah, so when I'm on a big day out with friends, or I'm trying to get lots of quick, back-to-back uses out of it, it's much easier to be filling directly from a scuba tank. And if you are hiring a scuba tank and you've just got the adapter, which comes free with every Scorkl, you're just doing that in 10 seconds. And you are right, the hand pump, it is, you do get a sweat on. It ends up being about 10 pumps per breath that you want. You obviously don't have to fill it all the way up to 200 bar if you don't. I mean, it's amazing that the pump can even do that. Because just to explain, your car tyre, you'll fill to 30 psi, but the Scorkl cylinder fills to 3,000 psi, which is 200 bar. Yeah. And so we're talking about some serious pressure that you need to jam into that cylinder just by hand. So, there's no free lunch. You're not just sort of doing 10 pumps and just getting 10 minutes out of it. But at the same time, you've got the scuba tank refill adapter, you've got the dive compressor refill adapter, which just come free. That's really easy. You've got the hand pump option if you don't have access to those. And so they just they're fit for purpose, whichever, comes, makes sense at the time. And then eventually, I'm hoping, it depends how long it takes for me to just finalise. But what I'll do is I'll be releasing a little electric compressor too, and I'm really excited for that. Because that will be, you plug that in either maybe 12 volt or just sort of off your car or your boat engine battery. And that might be only sort of like a 5-10 kilogram little compressor. And you just sort of sits there pumping away sort of for 5 minutes. And, that's almost the best of both worlds. Although that'll be a little bit more expensive than, say, the hand pump. So, it's just, there'll be a range fit for purpose for whatever makes sense at the time.
Where can people check it all out? Like, have you got a YouTube channel? Have you got some videos up? People can come and see some demos?
Oh, I'm glad you asked, Shrek. So just because I've been focusing for 2 years just to try to get this to market, it's been hard to find to buy, and I've sort of done that on purpose. But as of very recently, I've just finally made it available to the public, and the only way to purchase it is at Scorkl.com, and that's SCORKL. Just sort of like scuba and snorkel combined, but without the E. So SCORKL.com. And so that's just like a web store. You can buy like a pre-sort of organised pack, the most popular packs, or you just purchase whichever items you want and build that yourself. And then, who knows? Maybe in a couple of years I'll be in retailers, but for the moment I'm just trying to sort of get the e-commerce side of things running well.
That's awesome. I love innovation, and I like seeing new stuff come to market. A lot of the time when you have new products, there's inherent risks that people want to make sure they're discussed. But I think we've given them a good coverage today, and we've had a bit of a chat about some of the risks, particularly around expansion injuries. People just have to make sure that they're breathing regularly on the way up, particularly exhaling, to reduce that risk. So, man, real pleasure to get you on the show, and thanks for backing our Kickstarter. The 99 Tips to Get Better at Spearfishing launched, and that we were pretty proud of that. Turbo and I had a good crack at it as well. We didn't raise anywhere near as much money as you did, but congrats to you and on a successful launch and finally getting this thing to market. It's a bloody impressive effort. Is there some YouTube videos I can link up in today's show notes?
Yeah, I'll send you through a couple. I've got on the website. There's sort of like a little blog section where I sort of feature trips I've done to Thailand and the Bahamas and all this sort of cool stuff. But itself, there's a Scorkl YouTube channel which has all the instructional videos as well as those big sort of dive trip type sort of things, which really showcase the cool things you can do with it. And you'll sort of see that a bunch of those are sort of almost lifestyle type sort of videos as well. I mean, that's part marketing, but also part, reality, because the the Scorkl, the whole, it's really trying to sort of get away from scuba diving, be a bit stodgy and old without offending anybody. But, this is just your light, fun, shallow thing that you're taking with friends. You go head out for a day, you have a couple of beers when you sort of come back. And, it's really trying to bring a bit of sort of fun, excitement back to that sort of day trip sort of stuff. So, yeah, there's a bunch of those on the YouTube Scorkl channel, and I'll send you a link for that as well.
When I spent a lot of time out on the water, there was definitely some little unique times where something like this would have been handy, like unfouling an anchor and checking a hull and things like that. I can definitely see some utility out of the item, as well as some appeal from a recreational point of view. So, cool. There's definitely going to be people that are interested in it, man. So I applaud your success. So thanks for joining me today, and bloody good chatting with you, David.
Beautiful. Thanks very much, Shrek.
Today I've got a sweet offer for you. To go with this free episode of the Noobsparrow podcast, I've got access to some free courses. How cool is that? Go to noobsparrow.com/Ted. Now, Ted Hardy from Immersion Freediving, a frequent guest on the Noobsparrow podcast, has got several free courses available at noobsparrow.com/Ted. Check it out, Freediving Safety. There's a full video course about how to avoid shallow water blackout, how to be a good buddy, all is the fundamentals of just being a good, safe Sparrow, and it's all free. Check it out, noobsparrow.com/Ted. There's another one in there as well about how to take a 20 to 30% bigger breath, which will give you more fuel, more time on the bottom, and make you a more effective Sparrow. There's also a whole lot of other courses there as well. Check them out, get a 15% discount, noobsparrow.com/Ted. So that was David Hallamore, the founder of Scorkl, and really enjoyed hearing about another innovative product. It's awesome to see in the underwater world. I like seeing sort of new stuff come out and people try stuff. So Scorkl, if it's for you, have a look into it. Anyway, I just wanted to give another quick announcement before we head into my chat with Luke Growney. The 2020 US Freshwater Nationals are going to be held at Beaver Lake in Arkansas in August, early August. I'd encourage you to get on, have a look at some of the details there. So it's the World Freshwater Spearfishing World Championships held at Beaver Lake in Arkansas in August next year. I'm going to try and get over there, but we'll see how we go. And hey, let's head into this next part of the interview with Luke Growney from Ninepin Wetsuits, who I really enjoyed getting out with for a day's diving. Today's Noobsparrow podcast is brought to you by patrons just like you. If you enjoy the show, love it if you came over to patreon.com and support the Noobsparrow podcast. Basically, Patreon is a membership platform that makes it easy for artists and creators to get paid. And we have a Noobsparrow Patreon. Basically, there's 3 levels that you can support us at: $2 an episode, $5 an episode, or $10 an episode, and you'll get some unique benefits. You're going to get early access to content. You're going to get first choice, first recommendations for guests in the future. And occasionally, for some patrons, we're even just going to give you a call and catch up with you. But it'd be great if you could get on patreon.com/Noobsparrow. Come and support us. So g'day Noobsparrow community. Welcome to today's episode. Had a bit of a sport day actually. It's day 3 in Melbourne. And today I got taken out by Luke Growney. We're sitting out the back of his place, finishing off coffees, and we're about to crack a beer. We got out for a bit of Melbourne diving. The weather looked absolutely atrocious, and then we got out there and the bloody conditions surprised us. Like,
yeah, typical Melbourne, 4 seasons in one day, and yeah, it does that a lot.
So, I mean, the boys all told me when I come down, they were like, you're coming down at the wrong season. It's a week before crayfish open up. The southern bluefin tuna aren't around. Kingies aren't in yet because the water's still too cold. And it was cold. We had somewhere between 14 degrees in some places, I think maybe max 16 in others. The old 5mm suit got a workout today. Is that pretty standard for Melbourne?
Yeah, that's just another day in Melbourne, cold weather, no fish. Yeah, it's pretty standard. So 5mm definitely a requirement this time of year anyway.
So we launched this morning, late this morning. It was maybe 9:30, and the weather was going to be like 20 to 25 knots, and we got out there, it was maybe 5 knots. And we went straight out. Can you just give us people a rundown of sort of where we went? And is that standard for a Melbourne day out?
Yeah, pretty standard runs from here. Launching at Sorrento, shooting outside the rip, the Port Phillip Heads rip, which I don't think I've ever seen it that calm. Yeah, I talked it up that it's going to be pretty nasty today, and it turned out one of the best days I've seen it, which is always good. And then, yeah, sounded around a few reefs, usual no fish. Down at Barwon Heads, hoping to see something, birds, fish, dolphins, anything. But nothing at all. So.
And the wreck?
The Canberra wreck, which is, dive that, which I think the mast is about 5 metres, 6 metres. Right down to in 30 metres of water for those that are that interested, which, that's always pretty cool to see, some good fish life around it. Yeah,
there was some good swim throughs. It was bloody good fun, actually. I just had a top day out. I knew when I come down here that I wasn't coming down here at ideal like fish seasons and stuff. Well, the weather was good. We were out in your 17R Haynes boat, and what a bloody magic ride. I had a cracker day out. So it's nice to have a beer and sitting on the back lawn and get a bit of a chat in. So I first come across you through Ninepin. You sponsored the 99 Tips to Get Better at Spearfishing book, and got involved in that. So I ended up buying one of your suits. They're bloody well-made suits, so it's nice to connect with you in person. Can you give me a little bit of a overview of how you started spearing, and how you eventually own a spearfishing business making wetsuits?
Yeah, I think from what I hear, it's a pretty common story. I started surfing first. I was late into surfing, about 19. Got my licence, drove down the beach and gone, I want to surf. So taught myself and did all that. Ended up moving down to the beach to live the surfing lifestyle, and then realised that there's flat days with no surf. What do we do? So ended up, very, very basic spearfishing setup. Still going out in the surf wetsuit in the middle of winter, no hood, gloves, booties, any of that. Freezing cold in Melbourne. And sort of got hooked there, and then I think quite a few years later, with a few back injuries, I can't really surf that much anymore, and spearfishing took over. Yeah, it was good. The more I did it, the more I enjoyed it, and then started getting onto bigger fish, better fish, and then getting other people onto fish. I thought, this is awesome. This is especially getting the boat opened up a lot of things that I wasn't expecting, and coming from being out in the surf wetsuit, realise how bad that is, especially in Melbourne. Just at the time, it wasn't, I wasn't working much and not feasible to spend, $400 or $500 on a wetsuit on top of just surfing wetsuits and everything else. One day I'm like, well, I couldn't do it. There's a lot of people that can't. Why can't I get a quality wetsuit cheaper? So thought, started looking into it and realised that, well, we can get it done and try and keep that cost down. So people aren't out there freezing in a surf wetsuit.
All right, well, let's hook into Ninepin. So, I mean, you started some prototypes? It was you and a buddy? How did it sort of originate?
No, it started off, I started looking into it and sent a few emails out to manufacturers and that sort of stuff to get something happen. And then saw online that there was a small spearfishing wetsuit business for sale. So I'm like, oh, well, that saves, a lot of legwork and the hard work of trying to find someone. I'll go and check them out. And checked them out. Instantly loved the suits.
I liked them. I ended up buying your biggest size, which was an XL. and now that you've met me, you know that I'm easily a 2XL, just about everything. But I've worn that suit, and it took about 3 dives for it to sort of stretch a little bit. And I don't recommend anyone else does that. Like some people say, buy a suit a little bit too small for you because it's better because it'll be tight, a nice sort of tight fit, which allows less water in there and all the rest of it. But the suit's awesome now, and wears well. It's very warm for a 3mm suit. What are your offerings? And what's your bread and butter suit? I mean, you make a 3mm. What else you make?
Yeah, the 3mm and the 5mm are both pretty standard. We've just got the plain black ones, which are more geared towards a freediving wetsuit. With a low waist cut, pants. Chest loading pad's a little bit thinner, but a great entry-level suit.
Yeah.
And then we've also got our camo wetsuit that's, 3 and 5 mil as well, but geared more towards around spearfishing and keeping warm.
Yeah.
They've got the Long John style pants and extra thick loading pad.
I think compared to other suits, like similar thickness, maybe your suit, like, this is just pure anecdotal bro science here, but I think it feels like a warm suit. Like, have you had that commented on much, that it's a little bit warmer than other suits of a similar sort of thickness?
Yeah, we have had that a bit. There's a lot of companies seem to go, especially with the Long John pants, they use a thinner material for that top half, whereas we opted to keep it 5 mil the whole way through. So, you've got at least 10 mil covering the chest, keep it warm, and no one wants to walk around in a 7 mil with that much weight hanging off you. So if you can get away with a 5, it's heaps better.
So you mocked Melbourne diving earlier, but you're a little bit spoilt, really. I mean, but it's quite seasonal here. Like, all of the species are seasonal. The crayfish season is in a 2-month closure at the moment. But then you have kingfish come through, but that's really only summer months. You've got southern bluefin tuna, but they come different. You got squid, which come in waves as well. Everything seems to be seasonal, and I've seemed to have missed a lot of it. But then, like, we come in today, we didn't really get onto any fish, despite doing some deeper dives and going over quite a bit of reef. Didn't really manage to find anything apart from some reefies. But we come in and we smash some scallops, and we got some mussels and even some oysters. That's a real pro to Melbourne diving, I reckon.
Yeah, it's one thing I think we do over a lot of the other states. The shore diving and just going out to get a feed is a lot easier down here. There's plenty of days you can get out, and as you said, just getting a feed of scallops, squid. There's always some flathead floating around somewhere, flounder, all those basic bread and butter fish that are actually great eating.
So what happened today with the flounder? You got some flounder. What happened?
Trying to be greedy. Didn't have a gun on me. Collecting scallops. Forgot that my knife had broken off a couple of dives ago, and I'm still yet to replace that. So I thought, well, I can grab these by hand, and managed to get the first one, 2 hands, and get a good grip. And swimming back to the boat, I saw another one. Being me, I thought I could be confident, and I can do this. 1 in each hand. Subsequently, lost both fish, which learning curve. I should have just stuck with one, or had the gun on me.
Awesome. So, like, going back to when you started, it sounds like you were broke, which is, I think, a lot of guys starting out. You know what I mean? Like, we've got very limited budget with equipment. A lot of people get themselves into trouble when they buy their first lot of equipment. They try and go too cheap on stuff, and there's definitely some things you need to buy once and buy it right. Wetsuit's probably one of them, especially when you're diving in Melbourne. I'm in a 5 mil. I've got 3 mil booties and gloves on, and I'm finding that I could do with 5 mil booties. And but the suit's been okay. I'm wearing a 5 mil Arapic down here because I don't have a 5 mil 9-pin suit, but that wasn't a hint. But like, you definitely need to. You can't skimp on a suit down here, I think. You've got to buy something and buy it right. Did you make any other failures with gear? What did you do right? What did you do well? What did you not do well?
Things I did right, I think, were borrowing most of my gear. I had some very generous friends that we're all sort of single blokes living in a house that would mix and match whoever had what, and sort of make complete sets of gear out of what we had, and made do. The one good thing I did do was probably couldn't afford it at the time, but bought a decent gun. That was that Picasso acid guy, I think it is, that we were talking about. Was that about 15 years ago I bought that, and I still use that today as my go-to bay gun. Still doing the job, which is, it's great. I don't know if they still make them anymore, but it's done really well.
I find that's a commonality with a lot of guys. They find a gun combination that works for them, and they stick to it forever. Your eye gets dialed in, you know exactly what that gun's going to do in every situation. But you've upgraded. You bought a Rob Allen roller as well. How does that thing perform?
Yeah, so far love it. Very accurate. I'm yet to really thrash it. I got it sort of at the end of last season, so it's only shot a couple of fish. to test it out. But yeah, I'm looking forward to getting out and using it a lot more this year. I went the 1100, which may be a touch big for most of the fish down in Victoria, but thought, oh, I'm covered if that big fish does come past.
Yeah, nice. And you've shot a couple of bigger fish too. You've the old southern bluefin tuna are out here. Chatted with James yesterday about that, and by now that interview will have gone out on the Noob Spirit podcast. So, what's your experience been with southern bluefin tuna? You've had some wins.
Yeah, some wins, a lot of losses. It probably took us close to 3 years of going out looking for them and coming home empty-handed. Now we've sort of got it pretty dialed in. Definitely getting better at it. Trying to do less big trips. A lot of the guys drive down the coast to get them, which is great, and that's good fun. There's a lot more of them, 4 or 5 hours away, but family and everything else, it's nice to get them closer to home without the 2-day trip. So, definitely one of the favourite fish at the moment.
I think Melbourne spearfishing for me is a lot like just getting a feed and having fun, and I think that's kind of a pure way to spearfish a lot of the time. And the diving out here a lot of the time, I don't think it's very glamorous, but it's definitely about catching a feed and feeding your family and stuff. Tell us a little bit about one of the more remarkable bluefin catches you've had. I mean, tell me about the conditions, what happened on the day, and how the situation sort of played out.
Oh, my favourite one was probably one I mentioned earlier today, was actually missing one. One of the first times diving blue water and not realising how good the visibility was. Looking at the footage afterwards, I realised that shot was nowhere near the tuna, so missed it completely. When I did miss, though, they came a bit closer. So I sort of threw the gun to the mate on the boat and dived back in with the camera. And it's just that attitude change, I think, without a gun and not down there to shoot anything. They knew that and came right up close, and just walls of tuna as far as you could see in every direction, which, pretty unbelievable experience.
We were out there today, and you seem to have a really good, almost like a line fisherman's understanding of when fish are going to pop up and stuff. Like you deliberately had us waiting in a location, waiting for that slack tide to hit, and then waiting for a workup to happen. Unfortunately today it didn't trigger, but I could tell that there was some knowledge there, and you've seen some things there in the past, and you called it you said to me, I remember, we're going to wait here for a David Attenborough moment. I thought that was pretty clever, actually, because it's a very visual sort of picture when you say those words like that. Obviously that situation you had was pretty remarkable. Can you think of any other occasions where maybe you've got lucky and plugged a fish out of a David Attenborough moment?
I mean, there's quite a few of them. Some of the best local ones down home were last year, where we had kingfish and tuna all in the same school, all just going little bait fish, and they were moving fast. It was hard work with 2 of us on the boat and in and out of the water constantly. I think we ended up getting 2 tuna and 4 kingfish out of that school. And it was great seeing all the linos get nothing. But that day, that was a very similar thing, just documentary stuff with birds bombing everywhere. There was dolphins involved, seals, everything was just out of control. And I think that was non-stop for about an hour, and then nothing. Everything disappeared, birds gone, fish gone. Don't know what happened.
Today we went out, there was a fair bit of use of electronics, and you might not be the best person with electronics, but from what I witnessed today, you're far better than I am with the stuff. What are some of the big lessons you've learned with using a GPS, sonar, and all the rest of the stuff? Like you were turning up, I don't even know how to describe it, what the button is, but the gain. Okay, there you go. So tell us a little bit about that.
That one I was using, fishing and diving inside Port Phillip Bay is very different to going offshore. You got to change the sensitivity pretty constantly. Otherwise, if you've got it set for offshore and you come inside the bay, you'll be picking up weed and just all the random stuff that you don't want to pick up. So that needs to constantly change, and with currents and water clarity as well, vary a fair bit down here this time of year. So it's just trying to get a better picture as best we can. Basically dialing it down until you've got nothing on the screen, till it's all black, and then just coming up slowly until you can start to see a little bit of something. Yeah, there'll always be a little bit of clutter there, so, and you want to see some, but yeah, generally that's about right.
Cool. The other thing you did was at times we were diving sort of, we were out in 80 metres plus of water and you had it set out quite wide, and then you'd bring it right back into 15 or 20 metre increments so you could really see the detail. I thought that was pretty neat as well. How do you go positioning yourself off your marks and stuff? Is there a bit of luck to that? I mean, what's the story?
Yeah, I think most of it's dumb luck. Where I can, obviously, you try and take tides and wind into account. And yeah, we don't do a lot of anchoring down here offshore. Most of it's drifting, as we did today with one in the boat, one in the water. Or, if there's no current, we'll sometimes have two in the water. If the boat's staying close by. And then just hoping that we drift back over it.
I was surprised at the wicked structure. I thought it was going to be fairly sort of barren and rocky, but there was massive bommies coming out. You're talking about 8 metre depth changes, and there were caves sucked in, and weed everywhere, and there was all sorts of stuff happening. Not a lot happening on the fish front, but there was a lot of blue throat wrasse, and jeebus, those things are the seeing eye dogs of the reef down here. And then kind of like the blue groper up where we are, and then there was sweep and a bait around and stuff. It was a little bit disappointing to not see some of the pelagic action, sorry. I'll get corrected otherwise. But when you're taking new people out here, what are some bits of advice you give them to help them get their sort of first couple of fish?
Biggest one's relax. I think most people get told that straight away. Just enjoy it. Don't think about the fish. Just try and have a bit of fun. As I say, I love getting other people on the fish. I think it's almost as good as getting them yourself. Pretty epic seeing, especially the newer guys get their first decent fish.
Yeah, actually, I've had a couple of relaxed days diving down here. James is very low key to dive with. I was diving off his jet ski yesterday around Port Phillip Bay. Today we went outside in Your Haines. It's just been very relaxing diving. What about scary stuff? Have you had any scary shit happen to you out in the water? What did you sort of... I know you've had a few. What did you learn from it?
Yeah, as mentioned earlier, I think I do every dumb thing that I shouldn't do that comes up on the podcast. Or don't dive alone. Don't let the boat drift off without you. All that sort of stuff. Always great learning experiences. Everyone's going to stuff up and make mistakes and do the wrong thing, but it's definitely how you handle it and
Tell us
get
about
through
losing
it.
your boat.
Losing the boat, thankfully I haven't had anything too major. Have had some very long swims back to the boat, which, especially in Port Phillip Bay, you can get comfortable going, it's slack tide, nothing's happening, the boat's not going to go anywhere. And then you look up and it's 2 kilometres away. Thankfully some good gear and some good fins will make that swim a little bit easier.
And all the training you've been doing for ultra marathon running, it just helps for that. Yeah. Hey, same diff. I was going to talk a little bit about scrounging, because I think when we come back in, there was oysters, scallops, mussels. We got a bit of everything. We filled up a bag, and it was a lot of fun. We were in probably 3 or 4 metres of water. We had probably 6 or 8 metres of visibility, and we just filled up a catch bag full of scallops and all sorts of good stuff. And I really enjoyed it. It was just it's more harvesting rather than spearfishing, but it's still like just a fun thing to do, and obviously food for the family. Tell us a little bit about learning that side of things.
Learning it, I learnt it as more of a breath hold training. I don't have the patience to sit on a couch and hold my breath and all that sort of stuff. I get bored and distracted quite easily. So, doing something like that, especially as you said, you're 3 to 4 metres, maybe up to 6 metres max, and you're constantly up and down. So it's great training for your breath hold. That breath hold training turned very quickly into, hang on, I can get a good feed here. And I don't think there's many out there that'll complain with a feed of scallops and mussels and oysters.
yesterday I got out to Eckhart's place, and him and his wife cooked up some amazing scallops, and we had first course was scallops, second course was a blue throat wrasse I shot yesterday, and it was a nice fish to eat, and then we had calamari, and we had something else too. Jeepers, it was good. It was just a good Melbourne spread of seafood, and I mean, obviously those two are machines with cooking, but it's a real treasure. How did you learn to spot scallops from the surface and all the rest of it? Is it just like a monkey see, monkey do thing?
Yeah, it probably comes back to that dumb luck thing. The first couple of times it was just like, oh, what's that? Went down, sort of played with it, and I'm like, swam up to a mate. I'm like, what the hell is this thing? And he's like, oh, they're scallops. Where'd you find that one? And very quickly realised they're something good to eat. So when you're a couple of blokes living in a house, living off enough to pay the rent, and you want to surf the rest of it, it's not bad getting a good feed of scallops. I think we lived off scallops, squid, crayfish, and abalone, which it's not bad when you can barely afford rent.
The old scallops, it seems to be you come into patches of them, and so quite often I was able to see one from the surface, and then I would sort of position myself above it, and then while I was doing that I was looking for the next one, and maybe the next one, and then if you could spot two, you get them in a line, and then sort of like pick up the first one, get the second one, and then you could sort of sometimes go on a bit of a run and get a few in a row. I think the best run I did was only about 4, but whereas probably guys that do it all the time probably get it 10 or more. Is that something you sort of did?
Yeah, it's definitely one of those things. The more you do it, the more you start to see them. They're deceptive as well. A lot of the times you'll see one and go, oh no, it's a little bthink small. If you see it from the surface, always worth swimming down and actually have a look at it, because you don't know how well they're hidden, what they're buried in. I think I found some of the biggest ones. Looking at it going, oh, it's tiny. I'll go have a look anyway. And they come out all right.
And you get the oysters, but you're not a big fan of them. And the mussels seem to be in numbers as well. But one thing you alluded to was you don't get mussels and scallops often in the same place.
Yeah, usually there'll be more of one and less of the other. I think on some of the best mussel beds, you'll be lucky to get a scallop. Not sure why. One of those things to figure out.
Nah, cool. Definitely good for a feed. I guess I want to ask you a couple more things. What do you think is maybe one of the biggest lessons you've learned in spearfishing? I mean, why is it such an addictive pursuit for you? Like, we've chatted a little bit about this today, so it's a bit of a leading question.
My favourite part's dead. Obviously, getting technically free seafood that's cost a fortune in fuel and exploring and everything. No, but at the end, I love doing shit. Like, love getting out of the house. Just want to explore, do something, see something new. As you know, today it was pretty calm offshore, but still, only 50 metres away. Every now and then you'd get a wave that'd break, which, it can all change pretty quick.
I was going to ask you some funny stories you've had out in the ocean. What's some of the funny moments you've had?
Funniest ones are always missed fish. Whether it's a poor shot or, if we're line fishing, it's a knot that's got let go. And, of course, especially the missed fish, they were always bigger than they actually were. And they keep getting bigger every time that story is retold. I think I've missed some pretty small fish, and, by now they're massive. The best thing, as I said before, just love getting out, seeing the stoke in other people as well. And as long as they're having fun, it's always a good trip.
You have some dramas with your equalising and stuff like that at times, especially around hay fever seasons and stuff like that. Have you sort of come up with any remedies to keep you out diving? I mean, what's your sort of approach to the whole thing?
Usually I'll use some form of eardrops straight after a dive to help dry all the water out. And, as I said, have small tubes and everything else, plus the hay fever, and which I think most people do have. So the only thing is not pushing it as well. A few years ago, I'd just put up with it. You'd struggle, you'd push through dives, and then you got 3 months out of the water because you pushed it too hard. So, the big one's just take it easy and learn to, that's sort of the joys of having a boat. if it is starting to hurt, get out of the water. You know, if I can't equalise properly, jump out, have a rest, have something to eat, some water, rehydrate, and try again.
No, I mean, one of the reasons I was asking is it's such a common thing. You know, I've had so many dive buddies where it's equalising that's kind of pulled the day up. And, it's not uncommon. So, no, that's awesome. What's next for you with spearfishing? Where do you want to go? What new equipment you want to buy? What's the sort of in the future for you with spearfishing?
I think travelling's probably the big one. Yeah, start doing more trips. Towing the boat, that's part of the reason I want a smaller boat. Easy to tow and good fun. So, yeah, I think the next fish will either be a Spanish mackerel or a dolphin fish. They're very, very high up on the list of ones to shoot. So, yeah, hopefully they'll be next.
Awesome, man. Well, thanks for taking me out today. Had a bloody good time, and I'm sunburnt as usual. And I'm looking forward to coming back down here and diving with you fellas again. We might have something teed up for February in New Zealand, possibly anyway. So, bloody pleasure chatting with you and diving with you today, man.
Yeah, cheers. Thanks for coming out. I tried to talk it down that, the weather would be horrible. We might not even get out there and everything else. So, yeah, it was good to actually get on the water and show you around a bit. Unfortunately, no fish, but as always, next time.
So as you can tell, I had an absolute blast in Melbourne. Today's 2 interviews wrapped out my Melbourne trip. I managed to get 4 interviews done in 4 days, and as well as 2 full days diving. It was an exhausting trip, but jeepers, there's some absolute champions down there in Melbourne. I had an absolute blast. So looking forward to this next trip coming up to New Zealand in February. Hopefully I can get over and do that. So thanks to all the guys again on patreon.com/noobsparrows. 20 patrons there now supporting the show. About $70 US per episode. So every single dollar of that goes towards funding trips to come out, do live interviews, and go diving with you in your area. So I'm hoping that I can get out and get this New Zealand trip done in February. But anyway, thanks for listening to Noob Spirit Podcast. Your reviews are always welcome. Catch up. Now, I don't know about you, but I love new gear. And spearfishing.com.au have got a huge range. Mad flat shipping rate, especially in Australia. And if you use the code NoobSparrow, you not only support us, but you get $20 off every purchase over $200. That's right, pump in the code NoobSparrow at checkout, NOOBSPEARO at spearfishing.com.au, and you will save $20 on every purchase over $200. No brainer. Thanks, Adreno. Today's Noob Spirit Podcast is also proudly brought to you in partnership with penetratorfins.com. Get on there, guys. Have a look at some of the designs they've got. They've got clears. The blacks are beautiful. Check out the Noob Spirit custom Oki print. It's mad as well. Larry's got a full range of wicked designs, and he's got a beautiful finish on his fins. He's recently updated his manufacturing process. It's even better than it was before. He makes some of the best fins in the world, and to make that offer even sweeter, pump in the code NoobSparrow at checkout and save another $20. Penetratorfins.com. Support the Noob Spirit Podcast by shopping with our sponsor.